morning! We're
Morning,
live.
US.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's small.
We're lucky. Today's a very special day for the podcast because
The final
Senor
episode.
Richey, I don't know if you should call him Tom or Mr. Richey,
Mr.
whatever.
Mr. Richey.
We'll call
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call him that.
Yeah, you gotta be.
He's in the
polite.
waiting room. Without further ado, should we just pull him up and get started?
I think
No,
so.
we're just sit here and wait.
Alright. Hello, Mr. Richey? Oh, he moved back down.
Uh-oh.
His internet's not working. He's gonna hit by the thunderstorms.
Hello, Mr. Richey?
Testing.
Testing.
Hello?
Clear. Tank 4.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Okay, I
coming
was saying
on.
I didn't have permission to speak in here, but y'all can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. I don't know if I need to find. So, would it be beneficial for me to have headphones for this, or how's?
As long as we don't hear an echo, you should be good.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah, there's no echo on
Yeah.
our end, so we're good here. I appreciate you coming on. Took a
Oh
little
yeah, it's
while.
good to be here.
Yeah, well, originally we were hoping to have you on before the test as like a last hurrah before the test, but this works well because now we can discuss the test, I guess.
Yeah, it gets really crazy, like right there, right next to the test. So if y'all do something like this next year, let's try to maybe get something to happen before like April 15th or so.
Yeah.
That would be pretty good. The one problem though is we're all seniors, so we're not going to be
Oh,
taking
so
any
y'all
more
are done
AP
with
tests.
this. Okay,
Yeah.
then.
We're done with AP tests. This was like kind of a one way we wanted to like study for the test and also just to kind of have fun with it at the same time.
Good deal. Well, it looks like y'all did that.
Yeah, we basically
We're hoping we got 5s.
We have someone amongst us who didn't take the AP test though. Avid Mothman Hunter.
Mothman took my AP test. Just like the bridge.
Yeah, he sadly could not take the test, but the rest of us were able to, and it was definitely an experience. But
Yeah. It was an experience I don't want again.
what do you mean? It was a fun test.
Yeah, it's always fun doing an AP test. Just wing it and hope.
All right, so
YOLO.
for just ask some general questions for you, Mr. Richey. We were hoping.
Okay, so are we live?
Yeah, we are currently live.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Actually.
So figure just ask some questions, get some discussion going. That was pretty much the plan. So, I guess the first question is, what made you originally want to be a teacher?
That's always an interesting question from people because it's certainly not something that some of y'all can kind of understand. It's not a profession that people are really actively encouraged to enter necessarily. It's one of those things that everybody says, oh, what teachers do is great and we love teachers and we need more teachers and all of that kind of stuff. But nobody on an individual level or few people actually encourage people to become a teacher. So certainly I never really had a whole lot of encouragement. I remember when I was in high school, I had this really great history teacher in 10th grade, and it made me think that maybe I want to do this because this guy had so much fun. You could just tell he was completely in his element. He was having a blast, and I was like, man, like I want that kind of life. And I remember saying something to my dad, and then my dad said, you don't want to be a teacher. And so when I went to college, I was thinking, okay, I started off majoring in business. And then after that, I switched to history. But of course, I was saying that I was going to go to law school. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of ended up twiddling my thumbs after I graduated and got a gig where I was doing some tutoring with middle school students. It was just really random, but I realized I enjoyed the whole teaching thing. And I started working on a master's degree in education and just sort of accidentally became a teacher. It just kind of happened. So I'd love to have some kind of story about how, I've wanted to do this all my life or something like that. But really, it just kind of happened. And I think a lot of the best things in life do is the same sort of thing that happened with my YouTube channel. That was something that really started just to have a place where I could put lectures so that when my students were absent, that they could go and they could see what they missed. Because you know how when a student's absent, they go to the teacher the next day and they say, "What did I miss?" And I'm thinking, okay, how am I supposed to explain that to you? Class was 90 minutes. And am I really supposed to tell you in 30 seconds or less? Oh, you missed this or something like that. So that was kind of what I had in mind. And then all of a sudden, after about a year or so, there were other people that were watching the videos, and it was kind of crazy from my view. I mean, it was really unexpected.
Yeah, we have a calculus teacher she used to upload videos to YouTube just as a way to teach the class overnight, and she said she would actually get random comments and emails from people online asking for help. So she actually stopped doing it online now and just has a private thing for us to watch now.
Okay, so yeah, she was just like, "Look, this isn't for the masses, and I'm not interested in doing that sort of thing."
Nah, she did not like the extra questions she was getting.
Yeah, because it's definitely something that I get stuff, especially this time of year. People are all, which y'all have been big supporters of my work. So I was like, hey, I'll jump on the podcast at some point. But at this time of year, a lot of people think that, oh, well, Tom Richey has nothing better to do than to be in 100+ end of year project videos,
Yeah.
And so that's why I have my custom short video product. One of the reasons that I've got that is just to kind of filter that out, because you really do end up being kind of the go-to for a lot of people who just have just random questions and requests. Anytime I post or go live, people are like, "Oh, check your DMs. It's really important." And like, okay, I'll check. And now every once in a while, it's really nice because it'll end up being someone who actually just wants to tell me something or say thank you. But 9 times out of 10, when people are like, check your DMs, it's like somebody who's got a question or something like that. And it can be kind of overwhelming. Like sometimes people, they don't understand. They think, well, why can't you just sit there and answer questions all the time? Or why isn't your app free or something like that,
Yeah, that's why I was trying not to be overly pushy of getting you on. So I hope I wasn't too much of a bother.
Oh no, not at all. Like y'all have really been great. And that's the thing. When people have podcasts and stuff, I really try to do whatever I can, especially this time of year when things have kind of slowed down. So it is something, and especially I tell people, especially people want shout outs and stuff like that. And it's just, well, if you want a shout out, then build value in some way. And certainly with y'all are in that kind of category. Like y'all have built value. Y'all have got this whole, hey, look, it's the Cult of Tom Richey podcast. So it's like, okay, I mean, y'all did something. Y'all are throwing my name out there. So when y'all ask, like, hey, can you be on my podcast? Like, sure, it's got the whole kind of mutually beneficial exchange sort of thing going.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. It's awesome that you're here. And so I guess a good follow-up question was, from deciding you wanted to be a teacher, what pushed you more towards the history aspect of it?
That really just kind of ended up being what I was qualified to do. And so with that, it was just, okay, I had the history degree. And so there really, for me to teach anything else, it would have involved me going and taking more classes in the content area. So that was really just kind of a practical thing. There was a point where I thought I wouldn't mind what I'm teaching, like whatever I'm teaching. I could teach anything. I just want to teach. I was kind of going through that phase, but I'm definitely glad looking back that I went into teaching history, because it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I don't think that I could really muster that kind of passion with anything else.
Yeah. So we actually hear Matson, who's in the call with us. He's actually planning currently to become a history teacher after college. Have any good advice for him?
Really? He's thinking about this in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of a rare thing, but yeah, really, I think in terms of it's good to kind of think about a secondary area, like if you have another, like English or science or something like that, or whether you think about you're coaching a sport or something. Now, I think it is a bit of a myth that a history teacher has to be a coach. That's really, there are plenty of history teachers that aren't coaches, and in fact, when I was hired at my job, it was really in terms of I had a master's degree, and then I had some coursework in history, and so the principal was actually looking for someone to teach AP US history. And so that's one thing. I think that one good thing to do, I mean, social studies is a competitive field, and so somebody that wants to teach in that field, it would be a good idea to get a master's degree as soon as possible. Finding ways now, of course, if you're planning on coaching a sport or something like that, you've got that to increase your marketability. But there's also the other side of that, where getting some master's degree coursework and going above and beyond and showing that you've put a lot of time into educating yourself, to really set yourself apart from the other candidates, because it's definitely one of those things that if I didn't have a job in social studies, it might be difficult to get one. So, that those are the main things, just making sure that, first of all, if you have any any affinity for a certain sport or anything like that, make sure that you're willing to do something with coaching that, get a master's degree as soon as possible, and just making sure that you are possibly even going and getting a master's degree in your content or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just going right, and then I'm gonna get my obviously my main in social studies, but also special education. That's what I was really those two
Okay,
together.
and
I
see that
figured.
now. And be careful, though. I don't know if and I think there are some states where you can reverse a certification, like you can actually get a certification taken off of your record, because that's one thing that sometimes I hear from people, that if you are certified in social studies and special ed, then you're probably going to be in a situation where you're doing special ed for quite a while. And sometimes that special ed certification might even work against you. But then again, like I said, I did talk to a teacher that lived in a state where you could actually get something taken off of your certificate so that you didn't end up being placed into that position over and over again. Now, on the other side of that, I typically see as well that really education is about relationships and who you know. And so, if you get along well with your principal and your administration, they're typically sympathetic when things are coming up. So, if they like you, if you're doing a good job and you're like, hey, I want to go from special education to social studies as soon as an opportunity comes up, then a lot of times they will do that for you, because they'll be able to find somebody else coming in for special ed. There are a lot of people that are certified for that. So, but then again, if you're ever in a situation where you want to teach social studies and they end up hiring someone else to teach social studies, probably time to go find another school where you might be able to work your way into what you want. So that's something to keep in mind, that special ed certification is definitely going to be really good for you, but it can be a little bit of a double-edged sword.
All right, thank you. I didn't know any of that, but yeah, I got a few of my friends on the soccer team. Their moms are teachers, and they're always like, Nick, if you ever need anything, we'll get you. We'll try to get you in at some of the schools around like where I live. And they're like, we'll get you in. We'll get you talking. And I'm just hoping. I mean, that's all I can do, really. Do what I do and hope.
A good thing too, if you're thinking about teaching in the same community where you grew up, because like I was saying, it really is in a lot of cases about who you know. And that's just the reality of it. It really shouldn't be. You would think it would be some kind of pure meritocracy or something like that. But I don't think that really exists anywhere. So in the education profession, I think that being in a situation where, yeah, you do know some people or you grew up around there, because I didn't grow up in the community where where I teach, but there are a lot of people who, who are in that situation, and that's always helpful when you have roots in that community. So yeah, I think that that's definitely going to work out in your benefit.
And then, I'll ask the next question.
Okay.
What really got you interested in European history? Because obviously, where you are in the States, I don't know if it's more interesting for you there or whatever goes on.
Well, that's of course pretty interesting as well, because just like when I say that I became a teacher somewhat by accident, then it's really the same kind of thing when we look at, okay, what got you interested in European history? Because the funny thing is that of all of, like really when I think about my interest, okay, when you think about what I really love, it's Greeks and Romans. And then, of course, most of my coursework in coming up through, university and such was in U.S. history. Like, I don't think that I ever took a full course in modern Europe, like a subject matter course. Like, I had an opportunity in college, and thinking about it, I had a chance to take a course about the French Revolution and Napoleon. And I didn't sign up for that course because it was said that the professor who taught that course assigned like a 20-page paper. And I'm like, I don't want to write a 20-page paper. And so I never saw, like, if I could go back and take courses that, go back and tell myself, like, there are certain courses that you probably should take, I would love that. But I really wasn't that interested. And I don't know what that, I was kind of vaguely interested in this, but not enough to where I would take it. Like today, I'd be like, hey, I'll write a 20-page paper on the French Revolution. I could do that. But at that point, I was like, no, I'll just take these other courses. So I really was never that interested in European history. And then I thought about AP European history as a course possibly to prepare students for AP US history. I was thinking, okay, my first year teaching APUSH, a lot of the students really struggled through it. And I'm thinking in terms of, like, what can I do to maybe make this a little less of a struggle? So I thought, well, maybe taking this European history course would be something that would be good for them, because then they can get acquainted with the exam format, learning someone else's history, and then they can learn their own history, and they can love that history. And that was my entire rationale for teaching AP European history. And if I could go back and tell myself, like, tell 28-year-old me that, hey, like, you're actually going to be like one of the most visible AP European history teachers in the country 10 years from now, I would have been like, like, I mean, it's just not something that I ever would have thought would be possible, because it was really not something that I had all that much of an interest in. And then now I'm just always like, I read more European history than US history now. And so, I mean, I've been to Europe. I really enjoy it. In fact, I'm making a quick trip to Europe next week. So, that's something that, I mean, I just wouldn't have thought about that at all. And now it's like, this is my life. So that is really just thinking about how accidental this has all been. It's really amusing for me to think about, because there are so many just like arbitrary just moments of impact, I guess, if you want to call it that, then that just sort of happened. And now here I am. But like I said, I wish I had a story that said that I was intentional about any of this stuff, but not so much.
So I think here's a kind of our fun question. Do you actually like ever wake up and say, "Hey, I'm a YouTuber"? Like, does that like come across your mind, like considering yourself as a YouTuber?
Yeah, it is one of those things that it was kind of something that, I mean, it is a little bit of a line, because on one side, am I a YouTuber, or am I just like a teacher that makes YouTube videos in his basement? And there is a little bit, as far as like sometimes I've been hesitant to do standard YouTuber things, but lately I've kind of taken some advice from my students. Like my students asked me, "What do you think about this James Charles controversy?" And I was like, "What? What are y'all talking about?" And so they tell me about this dude that puts on makeup on YouTube and had like 16 million subscribers, and then he had 13 million subscribers. And I'm like, okay, this is just whatever. But I told them, I said, you know what? Y'all said James Charles, right? And the James Charles controversy. They said, yeah. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to make a clickbait video, and I'm just going to talk about like the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution, and James the First, Charles the First, Charles the Second, James the Second, and see what that does. And I thought it'd be the type of thing that got a whole bunch of thumbs down. All right. That I was just like, this is going to be total clickbait, and it's going to be, haha, you already watched the ad and now you got something that you didn't think you were going to get. But people loved it. And it was just, I just did this kind of standard thing. And then the other night, I did a telethon on my channel to raise money for the Cincinnati Zoo in memory of Harambe. And we actually we made a $420 donation to the Cincinnati Zoo, and 200 of that was raised from the people who were participating. Like I did, 220 of it was mine, but I said that I'd match gifts. And so I matched their gifts, and they were like, we got to about 300, and somebody was like, let's get to 420. And I was like, okay, well, y'all just keep donating and I'll keep dancing and playing songs and answering questions and shouting out until we get to that point. And so that was a lot of fun. So it's really that sort of thing that, every once in a while I'm at the airport and somebody's like, are you Tom Richey? Or sometimes they're like, are you that guy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy, that guy that talks about European history. And, so sometimes they don't remember my name, but it's like that guy. And one of my students told me that, because what I've got to think about, I've got about 140,000 subscribers. And, about a year ago, I guess I had 107,000, and now it's 140,000. I have to keep updating. But one of my students said that my recognizability is probably a lot greater than my subscriber count, because a lot of people watch my videos that aren't subscribed, and when they're watching them in a class, they may or may not be subscribed or anything like that. So, it's like normally somebody with my subscriber count could probably just go to the airport and all that kind of stuff. There was one time that I was out with my daughter about 6 months ago. We were just eating dinner at a Mexican restaurant, and a couple guys came up to our table because we live in Clemson. It's a college town. And a couple guys just came up to the table, and they're like, are you Tom Richey? And they wanted to take a picture. And my daughter's like, she's just like, my daddy's famous. And I'm like, not that famous. Like, it's not like that. But so, yeah, I mean, there is a little bit, because it's not like I'm somebody who does YouTube full time or something like that. But there definitely is a little bit of an element there. Like, I actually just got my play button that I haven't opened yet. So I'm kind of excited about that. So I've never really been able to live completely in that YouTuber space. Yeah. But certainly it is something that, has been a lot of fun. So, as far as how I'm going to redefine myself, continue to define myself, we'll see. Because I mean, that James Charles video ended up being the most popular non-live video that I did all year, all through 2019. So that's got a lot of possibilities. So we'll see where that goes.
So there's no current certain plans of wanting to expand more into the YouTuber realm, just keep it more to history at the moment?
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I definitely just need to ramp up my production in general. And so I don't want to get to where my channel's just full of just clickbait videos. But yeah. I do want to continue doing my standard thing. But yeah, I think that, if I can do a little more just chiming in on random stuff, my audience seems to like that better than some of the test prep videos. So we'll see. But yeah, I really kind of shoot from everything I've done in life, all of the best things that have happened in my life have really been a result of shooting from the hip. And that's what I think that I'll keep doing.
So as long as I don't ever see a giant red arrow in one of your thumbnails, I think we'll be good.
Now wait, the giant red arrow?
Yeah. It's the classic thing that YouTubers do for clickbait, and they'll make a surprised face or something like that.
Okay, so why? So just don't stoop to that level, is what you're telling me.
Yeah. Don't get to like the huge clickbait level because those ones are it's like no return from that.
Like red circles and
Yeah,
Right, and
That's-
I think every once in a while I can put a clickbait video out there, and people are
Yeah.
like, "Ha, Tom, you got me," and it's kind of funny. But I could see where if it ended up being a regular thing all the time, it wouldn't be nearly as amusing.
Yeah, like like what you did with James Charles, that was pretty good. It's just like it shouldn't be like at least in my opinion, shouldn't be a everyday occurrence kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it is pretty cool that you were able to take modern I'll call it drama and like relate it to actual historical events. I think that's a definite way to.
So that was the thing. I was like, okay, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to just go on there and give my opinion about it, but if I was able to like make it relevant to what I do on my channel, then that's something I think that is, that's fair game. So yeah, that's something I'm glad to get the feedback, and that's where having conversations like this is always great when guys are putting together a podcast. Because it's just one of those things that when I can hear from people and I can get that feedback, it kind of helps out.
Yeah, I think it's just like a great way because it also like shows it's like able to make the students see like correlation or relations and actually get them more interested in this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I wanted to ask about this because I remember joining one of your live chats on Instagram one time, and you were doing a Fortnite dance and were practicing it. Was there a certain reason to that, or was that just like for fun?
Yeah, that's just they wanted me to do the default dance, and so I did the default. I learned the default dance and did it. I actually did that during the Harambe telethon the other night. Like somebody was like default dance, and I was like, all right, if there's a super chat, I'll do the default dance. And so sometimes I just think the Instagram lives, especially, that there are some people that use Instagram lives to actually do like really businessy kind of stuff. That they do things that are related to their business. And for me, it's always seemed like the best use of Instagram Live is just it's a way for me to like have direct contact with the members of my audience who are like most passionate about what I do. And I think that that's always fun. So when I go live on Instagram, a lot of times it's really just let's have fun together. Let's like there are some people that try to ask me serious questions, like history questions, when I'm on Instagram Live, and I typically don't answer them just because I'm like, hey, I'll do that when I'm broadcasting on YouTube or something. I'm just here for fun to let off a little steam with my, with some of my friends here. And so, yeah, when they're just like, hey, let's do the default dance, or can you do this? And I get to find out some pop culture stuff because I had no idea what the default dance was. And so now I do. Now I can do it poorly, but I can still do it.
Here's another question that kind of relates. So, like, was it like your I guess say your audience that kind of pushed you into more, let's just call it like a meme slash pop reference kind of culture for your page? Because it doesn't seem you try to stick to like a traditional teacher anymore. It seems like you're getting more into what the cool hip kids do these days.
Okay, and where are you going with that? Or is there a
Well,
question?
yeah, the question was like, what was it like? Just your audience that pushed you into that, or is that just like happen natural? Like,
That is really kind of interesting because I've never really been somebody that is conventional. There was one time I remember there was some time where somebody called me like professional, and I was in my 20s, and I was like, really? Like, that's not really how I see myself. I enjoy the whole memeing thing. But yeah, I've really it's kind of funny because there are other teachers online that they post things like this day in history kind of stuff.
yeah,
And I feel like other people are doing that. And also a lot of teacher accounts, their audiences are primarily teachers. And that actually differentiates me from a lot of like teacher YouTubers as well. Like I really try to like get my student audience, like I target my social media to that student audience. So it's really, I would say that is more of an extension of my personality than anything else, just because I find that kind of stuff amusing. It's like somebody can say, "Oh, this day in history," and I'll be like, "Hey, here's a SpongeBob meme that I made or that somebody else made or something like that."
So like, what did you think when people started actually making memes about you or like of you?
Yeah, that's something that is like, yeah, that's awfully flattering, and that's something that my day job students, my actual students, it got to where one year, it was a couple years ago, when the kids came in and they said that, yeah, we Googled you and it was a bunch of memes. And
That's
it's
awesome.
kind of funny because when kids get to the school now, they, because there was a group of kids that they, when they started at the high school, my channel was really just kind of like, it was there, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And by the time they graduated, it was one of those things like where people were like, "Oh, Tom Richey's your teacher," and they're like, "Hey, we see him every day. He's not that great,"
Oh,
and so with that, it's just kind of, yeah. But sometimes we'll make memes in class and that sort of thing, and I enjoy it. And then the rapping, like that was something that really, the whole warm water rap thing, it
yeah.
it really just started at the way that started was, it was snowing one evening and I didn't have anything else to do. Like, I couldn't go anywhere because I live in South Carolina. If any snow falls, then it's just like, well, you're pretty much stuck at home. And I just decided, like, got this rap beat, and I was like, let me make a rap about Louis the 14th. And so I made a little rap about Louis the 14th and posted on SoundCloud, and I did a few other things later just because it was fun. And that's why I don't like necessarily put out like a warm water rap thing regularly. It just kind of happens when it happens, because it's really just kind of, I do it to amuse myself and then I just put it out there.
I feel like that's like probably the best way to do it though, because like if you're forcing yourself to make them, they're probably not gonna be good. Because if like you're not enjoying making them, then people aren't probably gonna enjoy listening to it. You know?
I that really kind of sounds like, and one of you's looking at becoming a teacher, and I was really struggling my first year teaching. So I emailed the same teacher I was talking about that was my history teacher in 10th grade, and I told him, I said, I'm struggling here. And what am I supposed to do? And he said, look, let me give you a piece of advice. If you're not having fun, then imagine how bored your students must be. Like, if I'm not even amusing myself, how can I amuse someone else? And so with that kind of principle, and that's what really made him a great teacher, and certainly not somebody that would have been an administrative favorite or anything like that. But it's just, when you went into his classroom, he was having fun. He was doing what he wanted to do on his terms. And that's something that you don't really see very often. And that's kind of how I've tried to model not only my teaching, but my online content as well.
Mm. So besides like European and U.S. history, have you taught any other AP classes?
I've taught AP government a few times. And so I don't teach that all the time, but I have taught it a few times. And so that would be the third AP that I have some experience with. And I tend to do an AP government review the night before the exam. I've done that for the last several years, usually with Hip Hughes. But this year with some other folks because he had some kind of conflict. So that's what's been interesting as well, that I'm doing this. I've been doing this for so long. It's like certain things kind of, they materialize. I mean, I remember when it was like me and Hip Hughes. I mean, really, it was Hip Hughes before me. And then, I got into the space. We did a lot of stuff together, and Hip Hughes and I we still work together whenever we can, but it's like both of us have gotten a whole lot busier, and with schedules and stuff like that, it's not as easy to do some of the stuff that we used to do.
Yeah. So
So that's always interesting. But yeah, so I do sometimes provide support for AP government.
have you ever done anything with the world history, or just never
Well, the thing is, and I've got a lot of great friends that teach AP World, and I don't want to like disparage that course or anything like that, but it's just not my thing. I feel like I like to go in depth. What I like about the AP European History course is the ability to focus on a window. You're really looking at a window of history in one continent. And you really get to delve into the art, the philosophy, and really get to know the people and really get to. I feel like when somebody gets out of AP European history, they actually like know a good bit about European history, especially like a student who makes a 4 on the exam, or maybe even a 5, but a 4 is a great score, and a lot of really smart people make that. And as far as that goes, and hopefully my videos help with that sometimes, but I feel like somebody who makes a 4 on the AP Euro exam, they actually know a good bit about European history, where I'm not so sure. And again, I'm not trying to disparage that course. I know there are teachers who are passionate about it, but when I start to think about the same amount of time for 5,000 years of world history, and even they're cutting it down to about 1,000 years starting next year, but I still think that whole like global approach, it doesn't really give teachers and students enough time to really delve in. Like, I mean, if you're only spending like 2 or 3 days on ancient Greece and Rome, like, is that really building up any kind of lasting appreciation for those civilizations? So it's just not my style. Like, I'm totally, I know that there are teachers who are passionate about it, just not a course that I would ever want to teach. And I also believe that the Western, the Western tradition is important. Okay. Like when you look at the Chinese education system, for example, they're not learning about the history of the United States. They're learning about their own history. They're learning about the histories that are closest and most relevant to them. Yeah. And if they learn about Western history, they're learning about it with some kind of purpose. And so I think that the European history, Western civilization approach does have like some really distinct cultural value that I don't see in a course that just says, let's just look at the history of the entire world, no matter like how immediately relevant, because that's part of, for me, that history is something that, it kind of makes us into who we are. And certainly the history of the European continent is responsible for, you look at our system of government, which is a direct product of the Enlightenment, Montesquieu. And, you see that now there are non-Western societies that are using these forms of government, but they're using them as imports. And so I think that, I mean, there are different schools of thought about this, but I'm a big proponent of the Western history model, just both because of depth and also because of cultural literacy to Americans that are growing up and coming of age in the Western world.
Yeah, it's definitely important for people of the U.S. to know their own history rather than they should know about other people's history too. But I definitely think it's more important for them to know about their own history, personally.
Yeah, and I think also, like, if there were a course that was, a course that were focusing on like Asian history or something like that, or Middle Eastern history in a certain window of time, I think that's great. That's great too. Because I think that when a student is getting depth, I think that is, that's beneficial for a student because they are able to appreciate something and it has value to them because they've really delved into it. Whereas you think about, have y'all ever read The Little Prince?
I have not. I don't know if anyone
Oh,
else
you should
here
definitely check out that book. It's a little bitty book, but I think about this every time I look at a rose bush that's outside my house, that there's a point, and I don't think I'm giving too much away, but the little prince like sees this rose bush and it's just like, well, there are all these roses. I thought that there was just this one rose and that was the only rose that existed. And the little prince feels defrauded because there are like all of these roses. And he says, what's so special about my rose when there are all of these other roses? And then the thing is, the takeaway here, and I've read this book several times. It's not a suspense thriller or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not spoiling the book for you, but the little prince learns that what makes the rose special is that it's yours. And so that's kind of, if I had to think about like the world history approach, it's just like there's this rose bush with all of these roses, and we're just comparing all these roses, and somebody doesn't really just get to fall in love with this one rose and really like appreciate it. So read that book though, because that is a book that I think too few Americans have read, that most of my European friends have read it, and friends that even come from other places like, like people in Turkey, which I guess is, has a little foothold in Europe, but it's something that for some reason Americans just don't appreciate. But yeah, I think that history, and that's one place where I really have a disagreement with the curriculum writers, whether it's at the college board or whether it's like these state curriculum writers, that basically history is being treated like a means to an end, because our public education system is designed to train employees, not individuals, and not thinkers, and not to self-actualize people, but to train employees. And so they make history a means to an end, that the end of taking this history course is seen by the curriculum writers as this person will be able to write argumentative essays and stuff like that, right? That this person will be a better writer. A better writer means a better employee. But when you look at somebody like Napoleon, let's think about the painting by Jacques-Louis David of Napoleon crossing the Alps. And when Napoleon's crossing the Alps, when you look at the bottom left-hand corner of that painting, you can see where it's got Napoleon's name etched in, and it's right next to the names of Hannibal and Carolus Magnus, otherwise known as Charlemagne. And what motivated Napoleon to be great was not that, oh, I learned history and I learned how to craft an argument and to have my thesis and 3 main points, and somebody was able to check these boxes on the writing rubric. But what Napoleon saw, like when he read about Hannibal and Scipio Africanus and Charlemagne, the great commanders of history, he's learning to be great, which that's something we can say what we want about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, but the guy's accomplished a lot. That was one thing I addressed on a podcast some months back, that Mark Zuckerberg, and you can even tell by the way he wears his hair, like he's got this fascination with Augustus Caesar. And I think that that's the chief benefit of history, is it introduces us to people who become heroes to us, who we want to emulate. And I think that, the teaching of history is becoming increasingly depersonalized, and it's losing something. And, it's just that, okay, well, I can be a better writer, and that's great. I think that writing is very important. And I think that that's a great thing to have. But it shouldn't come at the expense of the heroic element of history, which I think is the best thing that the study of history has to offer any of us.
Tom, before you get to the next question, I got to go to the sports banquet. So thank you, Mr. Richey. You've helped me throughout the whole entire year. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and thank you for your advice and input. It has been awesome to hear you speak about European history and history in general.
Well, good.
Thank
It's been
you,
great
sir.
talking to y'all, and have fun at your banquet.
All right. So, when you were in high school, did you take any of the AP classes?
That's the other funny thing. I never took a single AP course or AP
Oh.
exam the whole time I was in high school. Actually, though, I moved around a good bit in high school. And so I was signed up to take AP US History my junior year of high school, and then we moved to a high school that didn't offer it. So I never took a single AP course, and that's kind of another kind of ironic thing. Now, that's another thing, though, as far as when you look at the history of AP and you look at the enrollment surge that's happened in the past like 10, 15, 20 years. When I was in high school, AP was really something that was for students who, these students are already ready to go to college. And we're trying, because I mean, it originated in the 1950s around the same time as Sputnik. And so it's like, well, we need to make sure that our young people who are the best and the brightest, that they're going to have opportunities to take college level work in high school. And now when you look at it, I mean, it's really become a vehicle more than anything for the College Board to make money. And so there are there are so many people enrolled in AP courses that really aren't ready for college level work. What they're pitching it as now is this helps them get ready for college. And that really wasn't what AP was about. But the College Board realized there's a lot more money in, selling this inclusive model. So that's something that young people need to appreciate, that when I was in high school in the 1990s, what AP courses really weren't that common, and a lot of schools didn't offer AP courses at all.
So I know one reason why our school has had an influx of people taking AP classes is because our school no longer makes it mandatory to take the AP test if you take the AP class. So now people are just taking them for the GPA boost.
Yeah, and see, that's something that I wish. I mean, I wish that the exam were optional. That you could really just have hybrid classes. Like if I were calling the shots, I would say that don't really have classes that are designated AP. Have students who are choosing to prepare for the exam. And of course, that's the other thing. The exam has become so complicated that it's very difficult for a student to prepare for it without the help of a teacher who will help them navigate the labyrinth of the exam. I mean, y'all understand this, that you could write a really good essay, but if the essay doesn't conform to the rubric, then you could end up getting a 2 out of 6 or a 2 out of 7 for an essay that was really good, but it just didn't do the things that, you didn't read the fine print, right? So you need a teacher to explain to you what the fine print is. And so that's something, if it were up to me, I would have a system where a lot of that burden goes back to the student rather than, there's all of this implicit pressure on teachers, sometimes not implicit. Because, of course, some people ask me that, like when I'm doing live chats, they're like, what's your AP pass rate? And I'm like, it's different every year. It's not my AP pass rate. It's my students' aggregate AP pass rate. And so, like this year, for example, like for our state test, our state exam in history, like 8 of my students made 100. And one of my administrators is like, oh, nice job. And I'm like, well, it wasn't really me. I had some really sharp kids in there this year. And so, that's the thing, that there's so much pressure on teachers that I think that if the exam were optional and if the exam were not tied to the course, then we would have more students that are taking the exam for their own benefit rather than because they're being forced to. I think the worst case scenario is like in my home state of South Carolina, which is one of the states where the state pays for students to take the exam. And the thing I don't like about that is now if somebody's on free or reduced lunch, they've got an economic hardship, they can apply for a scholarship from the College Board. Like there's a procedure where you can apply for that. So, but some of these kids, like they come from families that have very comfortable incomes and the state's paying for them to take the exam, whether they pass or fail it. Now, I wouldn't mind giving people a rebate. If the state were to have some sort of rebate system to where when you pass this exam, you get some kind of refund from the state or something like that. But what we're doing, it seems like taxpayer dollars are subsidizing failure. Now, of course, the College Board isn't going to complain about that because, again, y'all kind of know what this is about by now, right? It's more money. And that's something that I think that having a system where the student doesn't have to take the exam, I think that that's a good thing. But now some districts, what surprises me about your district is there are some districts that I'm familiar with that if the student chooses not to take the exam, they don't get the AP credit.
Yeah, no, we still offer the GPA boost whether you take the test or not.
See, that's interesting. But then again, I I would love to teach a course in US or European history just once that doesn't have a test attached to it. That's one thing. Every once in a while, I'll get to just teach like a world history honors or something like that. And a lot of times I enjoy that so much more than I enjoy my AP classes because I actually get to teach the class on my own terms. Which, of course, with AP, that's really the last thing that you're doing. At least if you're thinking like, oh, I've got to put this test first and that sort of thing. Which that's always my advice to teachers. Like, look, don't stress out too much over the exam because, again, my 10th grade teacher when he told me like make sure that you're having fun. That's hard to do when you're teaching on somebody else's terms. And so that's why often I tell my students now, I've been doing this for more than a decade, and I tell them that ultimately the exam that's on them. That I'm trying to teach a history course, and of course they're being adequately prepared for the exam. I hope more than adequately, but at the same time, I don't make it my responsibility to whether they pass or not. Because yes, I mean I've got a responsibility to adequately prepare them, but when you think about in terms of going beyond that responsibility to adequately prepare them to being primarily responsible for if they pass or not. That's a really, to me, it's too heavy of a burden to put on a teacher.
Out of curiosity, have you ever heard of the YouTube channel called Polymatter?
I have not.
So about a year ago, they uploaded a pretty interesting video called "The College Board Monopoly on Education." I recommend checking it out sometime. It's like 7 minutes, so it's not too long of a video.
Okay, let me take a look at this. Okay, so because I mean it's late May. And I'm done with students for the year basically. So let's go ahead. So let's see here. So this is College Board
Monopoly on Education. It's the title of the video.
Okay, I need to definitely take a look at this. Okay, so Polymatter. Okay, interesting. Okay, so okay, well let me go ahead and take a look at this because this is definitely something that I think is important to kind of get into because a lot of states they've rejected Common Core. Like my state of South Carolina is one of those states that has rejected Common Core. But at the same time, with the College Board being in charge of these, hundreds of thousands of people take these exams, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, when you take a look at that, then it's really like a back door for Common Core to come in and you end up having to teach history in a way that they tell you to. And so it really is turning into very much a top-down approach to teaching, whereas, teaching should really be originating with teachers themselves and what they're passionate about. And so with that, yeah, I've got this up on my YouTube, so I'm going to make sure to take a look at this sometime.
Yeah, so we're from Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure we're doing Common Core stuff because I remember when we left the middle school in our district, they were saying that the next round of, I think, 8th graders were going to be the ones who start experiencing the Common Core being integrated into the district. So it was like, good luck to them.
Yeah.
Because I remember the other thing was, like, when we were doing, like, basic, algebra, and then when my sister, who is a few years younger than me, was trying to ask for help with algebra at home, and seeing, like, the way Common Core was teaching it, I had no idea how to help her out, because it was just, like, a complete different way of doing the algebra that they used to teach. Yeah, and Nick here, and the other different Nick, who's also in the call, he just confirmed Pennsylvania did adopt the Common Core educational standards. So it's a rough ride. Luckily, our grade didn't have to experience it.
Yeah.
So another a good question. What's your favorite period in European history to like teach or just like learn about?
Well, as far as that goes, I really tend to, just like I said, that my favorite My favorite history is really like classical history, Greeks and Romans. My favorite U.S. history is before the Civil War. My favorite European history is typically the first half of the course, like before 1815. Like after 1815, I'm not nearly as passionate about it. The closer you get to the present day, I start to lose interest. And I really, it goes back to the Roman historian Livy. He said that a lot of people, they prefer more recent things. They're like, oh, you should write about more recent stuff because we want to hear stories about that. And he's like, well, look, that this early stuff has been filtered. Like for me, the farther back you go in history, the more that it has stood the test of time, that people have repeated these stories over and over and over again and been inspired by them. That's part of the reason I think we should be offering more like Bible as literature classes, not from any point of view of religious indoctrination, but just so people know these stories that people have been telling for thousands of years, and these stories that have really, in a lot of ways, shaped our culture, that that are going to be lost because everybody's just scared to mention the Bible. A lot of times, even if I'm in my world history course, I'm teaching about ancient Israel, I'll have a student who says, Mr. Richey, we're not supposed to talk about this in schools, are we? And it's like, where did you get that from? Like, I'm not supposed to indoctrinate you with religion, but there's nothing that stops me from teaching about, very important civilizations. So yeah, for me, it tends to be really the earliest stuff, gets me going more than anything recent. Now, I do enjoy modern philosophy. That's something that, when it gets to like existentialism and some of these other things, like I really get into that. That I find interesting. But as far as like 20th century history, I could really do without a lot of it.
So I think my personal favorite one when we were going over the course throughout the year was the period 3, just because I liked the Industrial Revolution, and I liked the whole Otto
Now
von
that you
Bismarck
graduated
stuff.
from high school, you never have to say period 3 again. Like, remember to like
Yeah,
the 19th century, like that works as well. That's another thing that I'm so irked by what they've done with those numbered periods, because it's just got people talking in this way that just like, whoa, what are you talking about here?
yeah.
But so you like that 19th century stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite, especially like I liked learning about the imperialism as well. It was pretty cool to learn about. A lot of the stuff going on with Germany and France at the time was cool, and we had to do a whole practice DBQ on Alsace-Lorraine.
Oh
And
yeah, a little Bismarck and Alsace-Lorraine.
my favorite part was a kid in our class when the DBQ was handed out. He asked, "Who is Alsace-Lorraine?" And kind of never let
Oh,
that go.
who is? Like,
Yeah,
ask like
who
who?
is? Yeah. So
Oh,
we
my
kind of never
Lord.
let that go on him.
Yeah, that's who is Alsace-Lorraine.
I don't know.
That's funny.
I don't know if Nick or Andrew wants to add of like what their favorite century is.
Oh, by all means.
Andrew can go first because
I
Andrew's.
could agree with Tom.
Nick, what a gentleman.
I know. Thank you.
A saint of our school, of course. But I would agree with Tom on this. I would say the 19th century is my more entertaining period.
Oh no, you said period.
Yeah,
How about you, Nick?
I was more Soviet Union, Yugoslavia era. My sister's coming in. It's annoying me.
yeah. Sounds like we got a little Yugoslavia going on over there.
Yeah, that was just interesting for me to like hear about and talk about, especially like the breakup between Serbia and all those.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
So another good one is who is like your favorite? I want to say like character, but like just person from the European history.
That's kind of interesting because that changes a little bit here and there, and I think that can be a little bit dynamic. I think a few standouts would be Petrarch and Peter the Great. Definitely somebody I've always just been a fan of, or as the Russians call him, Pyotr Veliki. And so that's something. Now Napoleon is, I've started to read about him because my French Revolution series is still kind of incomplete. I've gone through the Reign of Terror, but I really want to know about Napoleon before I charge into that content. And the more I read about Napoleon, the more I'm really fascinated by him. And of course, I think a lot of times Napoleon is just labeled as a dictator, and people put him in the same spot with all these crazy people. And it's really, fascinating because as I try to understand the French Revolution, and people are always like, did Napoleon hijack the French Revolution or did Napoleon complete it? The more that I read about Napoleon, the more I'm convinced that Napoleon completed the revolution, because the revolution itself appears chiefly to have been about nationalism and about uniting the French nation. And Napoleon was able to do that in a way that no one else was able to do. And if you think about this, like especially, I think Napoleon has something to say to our polarized political climate. Here was somebody that they follow him, and he gets defeated in Russia, and he comes back, and they build up another army. And then he's defeated several times, and then he's exiled. Now, then when he gets out of exile, he comes into France. They open the gates of Lyon to him, and he goes into these cities, and every city that he goes into, they're opening the gates, and Napoleon is letting everybody know, like, you deserve a ruler of your choosing, not this king who's been put over you by foreign powers and claims divine right. Napoleon never claimed divine right. Napoleon's like, look, you put me here. And Napoleon was able to show like gratitude and camaraderie with the French people. And I'm really starting to understand why it is the French people, when they realize, like, look, our emperor, not the emperor of France or whatever, but our emperor has gotten out. And Napoleon always cast what he was doing in reference to the French people and in reference to the place that they gave him, that they have chosen him. And that's the thing that, and I think sometimes I have to remember that as, somebody that's on YouTube. Like, we kind of started this podcast with me talking about how all of these random people are just like, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And I try to do as much as I can,
Yeah.
but it's impossible to do it all. And Napoleon is that type of person that I always have to remember that when there are people who are supporting my work, that I need to give something back. And it's not just I need to, that it's like I have an obligation to. It's like these people have put me where I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I think that, Napoleon is really somebody who can teach us some life lessons. And I think that is where history has its greatest value, is that we learn about life from somebody who was good at it. And I think that Napoleon, even though a lot of times people remember him as someone who was defeated, that Napoleon, he was pretty freaking good at life. When you think about it, maybe a little bit too good at life, which is why all these people, they say, what, if you don't have haters, then who are you, right?
Yeah. But so one question, you don't really have to answer this if you don't want to, was about, it was lost train of thought a little. So I noticed you posted quite a few videos about like the current President Trump. So I was just wondering what kind of like inspired you to like make those videos, or is it just like you wanted to say your opinion on him? Like,
yeah, that's kind of interesting because you notice I haven't really done a lot with that lately, and who I am tends to kind of redefine, like especially who I am on YouTube. And that's one of those things. Like, I did make a video that sometimes I took down and then I put back up. I put it as unlisted, where I made a video after I'd met Donald Trump. And a lot of like younger people, he's a very polarizing guy. It's like you kind of love him or hate him. And for me, I just felt like I needed to explain to my audience, like, let me explain to you where I'm coming from, and why let me explain to you, why this was significant for me, like to meet Donald Trump, why this was something that, was really kind of a big time like event in my life, a moment of impact, if you will, that, here I am, I'm getting to meet Donald Trump, like somebody that I looked up to as, someone who was a young man, like before he ever really got involved in politics. And of course, people your age, they only know Donald Trump for what he's done in the political arena, like quite recently, and not so much as like an entrepreneur. Like, sometimes when we're on the Gilded Age in U.S. history, I'll play like an episode of The Men Who Built America. I don't get to show many movies or shows, but that's something I always like to show off a little bit, because a lot of students will go home and they'll watch more of it later. And Donald Trump is on there, and he's not on there as a politician. He's on there as somebody who is, a very like well-known businessman. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't get. Now, I did a few like, Trump-oriented videos, but then I kind of got to where I was like, I don't want to polarize my audience. So that's something that when it comes to certain things about current politics, I'm just a little bit hesitant, because I realized that I don't want my work to be seen through the lens of anyone else. And when you identify yourself with someone, and that's what's really interesting, is when you talk about like, do you consider yourself like a YouTuber? That's something to where in 2016, I'm just Tom Richey. I'm another American just like anybody else, and I'm saying my opinion just like anyone else. But I realized that like, hey, people actually care about what I think, and when I don't think the same thing they think, they don't like it. And so one of the things that you have to think about, it's like, if you want to be a source of information, which is basically what I am, if I want to have that kind of credibility, then I need to be someone who isn't like putting stuff out there that's alienating people. Whether it should be alienating people or not is another question, but it's just that it does. Like, I mean, there are students who've told me before that like their teacher doesn't like show my videos in class or reference them just because I've got a reputation for being a conservative. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, whether the world should be that way or not, that's irrelevant. It's just what it is. So I think that in the current political climate, I think that most people are probably going to be better off just trying to keep their political views to themselves. Now, there are other things that I'll sound off about, such as Brexit. Like, I'm very much pro-Brexit. And I think that, going out there and explaining to people how overhyped this is. Now, I don't think the European Union should be dissolved. I think the European Union is a beneficial institution for the European continent. But when we think about that, the UK is the 5th largest economy in the world, like, certainly it's not going to be like a world-ending event if they aren't part of the European Union. It's like, okay, it's a change, but people are acting like, oh, this is just, this is just going to be cataclysmic. And it's like, no, not really, not necessarily. So there are some things like Brexit that I will talk about and I will share my thoughts on. But I think that Trump himself has become like just such a polarizing thing, and especially with young people, that I don't get into that arena the same way that I used to. And that's just a deliberate decision that I had to make as someone who, wants young people of any political persuasion to feel comfortable learning from me.
It's just like, this is kind of like a side comment. Something I observed about like social media and Trump. It seems like on Instagram, like if you go to like comments on his post, they seem a lot more supportive of him. But when you go on Twitter and see the people responding to his tweets on there, they seem to be very against him in almost every aspect. So it's weird to see.
And I think that and I think that says something about those platforms, because certainly, like, here's something as well that, like, Twitter will, like, I'm very careful about what I respond to on Twitter, because yeah, if I were to respond like favorably to one of Donald Trump's tweets, then a lot of my followers would see that whether they follow Donald Trump or not,
Yeah.
And so sometimes when he posts on Instagram, I'll actually comment on the post and say something, because my followers who are on Instagram, they only see that if they follow Donald Trump on Instagram. And so it is a way for me to, like, connect with other people in my audience, like, in a positive way. Like today, his Instagram post, it's hilarious. I mean, he's got some good people running his social media, where it's like, it shows like Robert Mueller, and Trump's like basically giving him this like bye Felicia kind of wave. And it was just funny. Like, some of the stuff on there is really funny, but it's not something that I ever like really like share or try to get into. But yeah, Twitter definitely, like, the only way that I think that platform can stay relevant is by stirring up controversy, and especially controversy like where there is none. Like, for example, like when John Cleese, the English comedian, said that London is not really an English city anymore. Like, most people agree with that, right? Like, if I were, if somebody is to say that London is more of an international city than it is an English city, it's really not a controversial statement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when I tell people I've been to London, people say, oh, okay, well, you haven't really been to England then, if you haven't been outside of London. Kind of like in the United States, like if somebody told me I've been to New York City, then I'd be like, okay, great, you've been to New York City, but you haven't like seen America, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because like those like really large international kind of cities, they seem to be more just of a mosh pit, to say, of kind of culture, not really having
Well,
like
yeah, and I
one
think that
unique
somebody's
thing.
saying that, and they're calling him a dog whistler, and it's like, how do we? He's just saying something that's like, I mean, when you look at the way, what he was noting was how everywhere in England and Wales voted for Brexit except for London. And so to note that, like, yeah, when you look at the support for Brexit in England versus in London, but then, of course, Twitter is set up to where it's like, oh, let's just call, some people start calling him a dog whistler, and then Twitter puts it on their main page that, like, oh, John Cleese has got people mad because, they think he's dog whistling. And that's the whole thing when people talk about dog whistling. It's like, it's not a provable thing. Like, when you accuse somebody of dog whistling, you're inferring that what they said was intended to mean something that it may or may not have meant. And so they take this whole category of things, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, now John Cleese is a racist, even though he lives in the Caribbean, like on an island that's predominantly black.
Yeah.
It really doesn't make a lot of sense for people to call him a racist, but that's how Twitter works. Like, for example, I've just reached the point this year to where my number of Instagram followers has actually exceeded the number of Twitter followers, which it took years for it to get that way. But I think that Instagram has become a platform that people are more engaged. Like, Instagram's always been more engaging, and I think people tend to be more positive there. And so people go to Instagram to escape the drama. And when you go into Twitter, you're like, okay, it's time to get into the cesspool and take the knives out. That's really the only way Twitter can remain relevant.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's the other problem with Twitter, is most of their, I guess they'll call it, content is just text. So it's like harder to have like a real connection with people on there, because it's just like, text on a screen. You can't really feel what that person might be feeling when they post stuff on, say, like Instagram, or you
Well,
have like
yeah,
an
and
actual
that's
picture.
another thing. Like, one thing, like I said, like Donald Trump, that's not something I really want to sound off about or identify with or be identified with. But when it comes to something like, for example, Confederate memorials, now I've really gotten to where I don't tweet about that a lot, but there was a teacher who in the fall agreed to come on my YouTube channel, and we actually had a conversation about Confederate memorials. And we realized, like, with that conversation, when we were going back and forth on Twitter, it really didn't have any meaning. But for me to get on YouTube with this teacher and for us to actually have a face-to-face conversation, like that was meaningful. And we had a discussion about like an issue that's become very controversial in pop culture. And, it was very like, it was very amicable. It was very polite. It was very courteous. And on social media, it's especially on Twitter, it's very difficult to have like a discussion, like a really fruitful discussion about Confederate memorials and why somebody like me would say like, look, those aren't, they weren't put there to be racist. Like, I mean, people actually died in a war. So but then somebody's able to kind of come with their perspective as well. But when we look at like, social media, clickbait, and even like some of these professional historians are starting to indulge in that, where instead of looking at something as a whole, they're like, look at this quote. And because of this quote, this statue should come down. And people get riled up. And it's like, how many of them have ever read a book about the Civil War? Like so much as just even one book, probably none of them. And I think that that's kind of, when we look at our attention spans that keep going just down and down and down. And I don't exempt myself from that. I think that's something that's happening to everyone and something that hopefully we're not, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Idiocracy. If you haven't, you should take a look at it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it personally, but...
Okay, well, the thesis of the movie is basically in 500 years, people are going to be a whole lot dumber.
It like just like in general or like IQ?
Yeah, in general. Now this is actually kind of pre-social media. What the thesis was there, it was based on that when you think about our birth rates, that the birth rates for people with like less education are a lot higher than people with more education. For example, like I've got a master's degree and I've got one child. Meanwhile, somebody who dropped out of high school may have 4 or 5 kids.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing there is that, because of that phenomenon, that people are going to get a lot dumber. But I think you add social media to that and what's happened to our attention spans, it might even be more than that. Well, it's getting to be about dinner time over here. So if y'all have got another quick question or two, this has been a really enjoyable chat.
Yeah, we have a few other questions. We're also, I don't know how much time you have, but we were hoping to maybe discuss the actual Euro test.
Now, I've actually already done that on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I've got like an AP Euro exam reaction video.
Okay,
if y'all have any specific questions about it, I'll be glad to answer those. But I have already kind of gone through a point by point on my YouTube channel.
No, it was just kind of like just general thoughts on the test itself, but that's fine. We don't need to.
Yeah, the main thing that I liked a lot of the topics. I thought it was by and large very accessible. My main complaint was the way that the prompt was written for the DBQ, where it says evaluate whether or not the Catholic Church opposed scientific advancements during this time, rather than evaluate the extent to which the Catholic Church opposed. You see?
Yeah.
So it wasn't they want a complex argument, but they're not really asking for it in the way that they're wording the prompt.
Yeah. Is it for the one? Is it for the LEQ? I did the one asking about population growth, and I talked about urbanization, especially during that.
Wow, so there are some people that actually chose that one.
Yeah, I chose that. I think it was Nick, if you're still here, I think he chose the one about the Great Depression, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, me and him both chose Great Depression.
One, because that you could tie that directly to Hitler.
Yeah. I just saw the population growth one and thought that one would be easy. So that's why I went with that one.
And the thing is, if you know something about it, it would be easy. So the thing is, if you pick that topic that's not going to be accessible to most people, that people aren't going to know a lot about, then you actually can do really well if you know something about it.
Mm-hmm. So the other one was about state centralization. Do you know, like, was that like also a very less popular one to do?
Well, I don't know. We're not going to know quite yet, like what the most popular ones were.
Yeah.
But I think that the state centralization one, I definitely thought that there's a lot that can be done with that. What I liked about that, it was so broadly constructed that there's a lot that people can do with it, whether they want to look at the new monarchs or the age of absolutism or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was such a variety of angles.
Yeah. And then for the what was it, the short response, I did the one about Great Britain's industrialization. I don't know which one Nick did.
Now, I'd agree with you on that. Like, I think that was a case where you want to jump at Henry VIII and the English Reformation, but then I realized the questions that they were asking about the Industrial Revolution were a lot easier.
Yeah, it definitely, like, when I looked at the between the two, we spent like a lot of time on Great Britain's industrialization as well. So, and it was kind of fresher in the mind anyway, because obviously going chronologically, but it just felt like that was the right one to do.
Yeah, I think that worked because, it's just that I thought that the third part C was a lot more advanced, I thought, for the Reformation question than it was for the Industrial Revolution question. For the Industrial Revolution question, I think that all you would have had to do is really, like, on the third one, it's like, okay, the Chartist, here you go.
Mm. Nick, which one did you choose?
I did the Protestant Reformation one only because I wrote a 10-page essay on on the English Reformation. So like I had all that stuff in my head compared to the Industrial Revolution.
Gotcha. Saying, I know I went for in the DBQ. I went for the church being opposed to science. Nick here actually went for going with science.
Well, and I think the key is, and that's where I have a problem with the way they phrase the prompt, is because what they really wanted you to do, like for the complex essay, is note in this sense they were, but in this sense they weren't, to make a nuanced argument, which for me, what I did in the essay that I wrote in response to that is I said that the Catholic Church publicly condemned science at that time, but at the same time, privately, they were open to it. And then I kind of incorporated a change over time element, noting that with the Jesuits being so involved in universities and in the development of science, eventually the Catholic Church had to come around and embrace that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that I did say more supportive than not, because the loudest voices are like those official condemnations of Galileo, which didn't necessarily represent the church as a whole. But then there are other documents like the one from that cardinal that you could use either way. So I thought, aside from the way that the prompt was constructed, I liked the document selection. I thought that it was a good selection of documents. I think it gave people a lot of room to argue either way.
Yeah, I'd say, like, looking back through these, none of the documents seemed like very confusing or like, off like the deep end and being connected to it.
Uh-huh.
But well, even if I didn't do super good, I need a 4 to get credit at college, so that's what we're hoping.
Okay, where are you going to college?
Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's in upstate New York, if you don't know.
Okay, good deal. Well, if they're mandating a 4, it must be a pretty good school.
Yeah, this year I also took the Calculus BC exam and the Physics 1 exam, and I need at least 4s on those as well. So we're hoping that I can skip 4 classes, hopefully. But
well, definitely good luck with that.
Thank you. But so what do you say is your favorite kind of music?
Oh, me? Metal mostly. That's
really?
Kind of where I musically, either like
rock and roll
or metal, even though once in a while I'll slow it down with a little Lana Del Rey or something like that.
Gotcha. You ever listen to Sabaton?
I have. It's not really my style. Like when I'm listening to metal, I'm not really into like the type of metal where I can understand all the vocals. It's like, I mean, if I'm listening to, yeah, so everybody asks, oh, if you ever listen to Sabaton, it's just not, it like musically, it's just not really my thing. I'm really more like chaotic, like screaming kind of metal
Oh,
when
really?
I'm listening to that kind of thing. That Sabaton's just not, it doesn't really have that emotional element that I want when I listen to music, whether I'm listening to metal or whether I'm listening to Lana. I'm really trying to get an emotional experience out of it that I'm not really able to get out of Sabaton.
So our teacher listens to a band called Guar.
Oh, Guar. I saw Guar one time. I went with some former students of mine. They were in college at that time, but they were like, Guar's coming to and it was just, that was crazy. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Whew. That was nuts.
I actually haven't personally listened to Guar, but our one teacher likes to talk about Guar quite often in his class.
That's great that you've got a teacher that like listens to Guar. Like you should really. Who is your teacher? Is this somebody that I know?
The teacher that listens to Guar is a computer science teacher.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so that
That
makes a little more
explains it.
sense actually, because computer science types they listen to all kinds of crazy stuff.
What you trying to say is
Yeah, but that's something. Yeah, I did see Guar one time, and that was an experience.
I should check out Guar sometime. Actually, give it a listen.
Yeah, musically, I'm not sure if there's really anything there, but the live show is, they're just like squirting blood out into the audience and stuff like that. It's like this basically like just red, like white. So, you typically go in like a white t-shirt or something like that. And then you look like you've been a witness to a murder or something.
That's pretty cool. Well, I mean, that pretty much wraps up all the questions we have for you. Now, I do have a kind of like, we've been talking about doing this, where our idea is to create a new channel, so one separate from your name, which would still do podcasts, but they'd be more politically based. So it'd be kind of cool if you'd be interested in joining us for discussions on there sometime. Obviously, whenever.
Oh,
if you have
definitely.
Free time.
And I'll tell you that, like, I'm really not shy about talking politics, especially on somebody else's channel. It's like on my YouTube channel, I try not to get into stuff that's going to inflame people. But yeah, if y'all ever want to, this has been a good chat. So, feel free to contact me anytime you want to put something together.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, because we want to, like, obviously don't want to have any politics connected to your name, so that's why we tried to stay as content focused when we did the other podcast, just in case of any reasons. But yeah, it'd be great to have you come on.
All right, well, yeah, y'all stay in touch, keep me posted, because this has been an enjoyable chat. I was thinking this is going to be like 15-20 minutes, and it ended up being a lot longer, and I've enjoyed it, so I'm glad I didn't have anything scheduled after it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. That's gonna be the wrap up for this podcast then.
Yeah.
All right, and hopefully y'all get some 4s or 5s. But just remember, if you get
hopefully.
a 4, I'm gonna be very proud of you. I'm very proud of a 4, always.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, y'all take care.
Have a good night.
Y'all too. Always a pleasure.
Well, I think that went pretty well.
Yeah, good job, Tom.
Yeah, as you guys really did not add anything.
No, I was staying back. You had it under control.
Yeah, I apologize. Wait, are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live.
Oh, okay.
Say hello
I'm
to
not
the
gonna-
chat. No one watching.
Hello, 5 viewers that are watching. All right, but yeah, no, I didn't really have much to say.
Yeah,
I think you had it solid there, Tom. Very, very solid.
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to ask political questions, but I wasn't like sure how open he was about them.
How if his
Yeah.
political view had changed a bit, but
It wasn't being
it's
nice.
good. It's good to know.
I can't
just
believe
got
he
political,
listens to
and I'm like-
Guar.
Yeah, that was something.
If you are listening, Mr. Richey, we don't we just think it's funny because Guar is Guar.
Metal's still cool.
Gua gua gua.
I listen to metal. Don't worry.
I like how he's like, oh, that explains it when we said computer science.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Computer
I'm kinda
science
hurt.
gurus
Computer
are.
science
I'm
is
kinda
its
hurt
own
now.
breed, apparently.
I'm kind of hurt now.
Dang. It's okay. You can listen to Guar at Monco.
Yeah.
I don't know.
When you go to
No.
Monco, well, when we drive up to Monco, Nick, we're gonna be listening to Guar.
No, we're not listening to fucking Gore. We're gonna listen to what do I have
Yeah,
on my
when
playlist?
Andrew
I
has to
don't
drive you to Monco every day.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
We're gonna
I'm
drive
plugging
up.
into his. I'm plugging into his speaker. We're gonna bass boost.
Alright, well, I should probably end the actual podcast. Thank you to the 0 randoms that came out. Appreciate it.
Make sure you visit us at Montco.
And,
Montgomery County.
if-
Sponsored by Monco.
yeah, this podcast has been sponsored by Monco.
Montgomery
Vsauce.
County Community College.
Vsauce and his new channel. Dink.
Well,
Thanks for watching.
And a big thank you to Mr. Richey for coming on, Tom Richey for coming on. Really appreciate it for taking his time out of his day to
Thanks, Sergeant,
come talk
for
to us.
helping us get fours. Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you for everything he's done.
Yep.
Really appreciate it. And have a good one, everyone.
Keep your eyes to the skies for Mothman.
As always.
Yeah, watch out for
Thanks for
Mothman.
watching. Yeah, watch out for Mothman. Boo.
Warm Water Records, Otto von Bismarck. Looks like there's some German states out there that need to be unified. Blood and iron, or like blood and bars. Y'all listen to this. I'm the Iron Chancellor, and I feel an obligation. Unify the German states under Prussian domination. A conservative at heart, but I've got a little trick. It's the politics of power. Call it real politic. An alliance with the liberals, cause I'm industry emphatic. And they're secular, they like my culture. Cough against the Catholics. Ban the Social Democrats, cause I'm gonna put it bluntly that Germany will never be a socialist country. I've got old age pensions and some accident insurance. If you're hurt at work, I've got your back, you have my reassurance. Call it state socialism, all the liberals gonna hate. But without the working classes, we can't unify the state. The position of Prussia in Germany at this hour will not be determined by its liberalism, but its power. Great questions are decided by speeches or majorities. It's blood and iron, bitch. I'll use war to spread authority. With the Austrians as allies, we took Schleswig and Holstein, then declared war on Austria, the next step in my grand design. Prussia won in 7 weeks. Austria wasn't any match. Then it's time to provoke France with the M's dispatch. Monkey led a modern army armed with telegraphs and trains. France decisively defeated, gave up Alsace and Lorraine. After unifying Germany, then I really had some clout. Now it's 1890 and I'm out.